It's time for Recipe of the Day. I've been mentioning tri-tip quite often lately, but this is the first time that I am doing a full daily episode on anything tri-tip related, so I'm very excited. So first, what is tri-tip steak? It is also called California cut, and sometimes it is called a Santa Maria tri-tip. It is sometimes what you get when you order steak tips or beef tips places. Sometimes it is tri-tip that's cut up, but usually something else is used for that, other pieces of sirloin. And yes, tri-tip does come from the bottom sirloin, and it's kind of this triangular shaped roast, which is why it's called tri-tip. It has those 3 points. Now, why am I obsessed with tri-tip? Well, I first heard about it when I was researching the steak tips. That's what it first kind of came on my radar. I had steak tips at a restaurant. I wanted to know what they were exactly. I researched. Tri-tip was one of the things mentioned, and that sent me down a little rabbit hole of tri-tip research, and I discovered that it is used in Santa Maria style barbecue, a California style barbecue that's open pit over fire, and it's just a really beefy, well marbled cut of meat. And I read at that time that it was used in a Santa Maria tri-tip sandwich that you can get all over that area of California. So I was doing that reading. I was like, oh, interesting. Maybe I'll check that out sometime. And then I started traveling around this summer and started seeing it on menus. So it was definitely on menus when I was in Alberta, Canada, when I was in Manitoba, Canada, and I saw it on a menu, a tri-tip sandwich in South Florida. And so then I was like, okay, I've got to try one of these sandwiches. And I did. And then I had to get myself some tri-tip and figure out how to cook it. And so all the experimentation began, and it has been a blast. This really is good beef. Now, you want to think about this the way that you think about something like skirt steak or flank steak, London broil kind of techniques, where you actually have a bigger piece of meat. It's not a single serve steak portion. Instead, you're cooking this bigger piece of meat and then slicing it. And as you know, I love that because generally speaking, when you have a bigger piece of meat, it ends up being different thicknesses in different parts, and the very middle is further from the heat source than any of the edges. So that means you end up with uneven doneness, which is different slices have different levels of doneness, which will appeal to different members of your family or whoever's eating. In my house, we have people who love medium well, even well done cooked beef, and we have people who like medium rare. So I can cook up something like this to a kind of medium rare in the very middle thickest part and know that those people are going to be happy. And then the slices from the thinner parts and towards the edges, those are going to go to my medium well and well done people, all from one cut of meat. So these tend to be around 2 pounds, 1.5 to 3 pounds at the most. And they are well marbled, like I said, and they can be cooked really in any way that you would cook any kind of beef that you want to have that kind of doneness, like a grilled steak or skirt steak, flank steak, like I was talking about. You're not going to want to like pot roast this or slow cook it or instant pot it. That's not going to be ideal. It is a very tender enough cut already with that bit of marbling. As long as you are slicing it thinly and against the grain, which I'm going to talk about, it's going to be beautiful. The other thing that I will say is it tends to be a less expensive cut of beef. I've done a little searching online where I bought it from my own grocery store, and it's definitely cheaper than skirt steak, a little bit cheaper than flank steak, maybe a little more than brisket. It's definitely cheaper than your grilling steaks, but you can slice it up and put it on steak salad and tacos. You could do all that kind of stuff, and of course make a great sandwich. So you can do some of the stuff that you would do with a grilling steak, but at a lower cost. So that is part of why I love it so much. Also, the flavor is great, like I mentioned. Okay, so when it comes to cooking these, you're going to start by doing some form of seasoning. I have an amazing tri-tip marinade that is going up on the Cookful tomorrow that you should check out. It's one of these marinades that I like to do that has quite a high salt content, so it kind of acts like a bit of a brine as well. You can totally do that, but it is not necessary. You can dry brine it. That will be really, really lovely if you have that time. If you want to have it in your fridge for a good 8-12 hours, you could do that, and I will link to how to dry brine steak. It'll be about the same technique, just bigger steak, and so you can leave it a little bit longer. Those things are totally great, but I think you just need to season it and cook it over high heat. That's all you really need to do. My first experiments with this were like salt, pepper, garlic powder, a little bit of oil rubbed on there, slap it on the grill. I put a probe thermometer thermometer inside, checked when it was done, and that was the first experiment, and it was amazing. Like, I didn't want to ever try doing anything else. But of course, I've done some other things. But like, if you just do that, it's going to be fantastic. And that is kind of what I'm telling you about today, but in a pan roasted way. So pan roasted is when you start it on the stove in a skillet, like a cast iron skillet, and then transfer it to the oven to finish. And that turns out really great. And you can do that any time of year. It doesn't just have to be when your grill is going, right? So you are taking your tri-tip steak and you're rubbing it all over with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Now, the recipe that I'm linking to says kosher salt, but that is because it is assuming that you are going to do the dry brine in the fridge. If you're not going to do the dry brine in the fridge, you could just use regular salt. That's going to be totally fine. If you do the dry brine, don't wipe it off or rinse it off after. And if you're not doing it, of course, you're not going to wipe it off or rinse it off, right? You're just going to season it up. Then preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to heat a large oven-safe skillet, like a cast iron skillet, over medium-high heat. Then add in 2 tablespoons of cooking oil, olive oil, grapeseed oil, whatever you like to use. Swirl it around in there to coat, and then add the steak in and just leave it there. Don't touch it for 5 minutes. Then have a little peek underneath. If it is nice and brown, flip it. If not, leave it for another couple of minutes. I will say that often I am turning my skillet every now and then when I do this kind of thing because I worry that there are uneven parts. And so by turning the skillet, I'm hoping to combat that a little bit. You can do that. I think I'm just being finicky and overly attentive. You could just probably leave it for those 5 minutes. But if you like to be doing something like me, you can turn your skillet around. So then once it's well browned underneath, you are flipping it over for another 4 to 5 minutes. You're getting that browning really good and started. And then that is when you transfer it to the oven. This is a rather thick cut of meat, so it is probably going to need longer than that time that we did on the stove. But we don't necessarily want it to be in that intense heat of the grill pan anymore because it's going to start to like blacken too much, right? So transferring it to the oven is just a little bit more moderate air heat instead of direct contact heat, you know? So just to recap, so you know where we're at, we cooked it for about 5 minutes on one side till it was well browned. Then we flipped it over, cooked it for another 4 to 5 minutes until it was well browned. Then you do not flip it over again. Leave it there. But I like to stick a probe thermometer into the middle, the thickest part, and then transfer the skillet with a steak in it into the oven. That oven was at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you have your probe thermometer, the kind that I like, has a little wire that comes out, and then you have a little digital reader that has a magnet on it that sticks on my oven so I can monitor the temperature. And remember, that probe is in the thickest middle part of that steak. So you want that to then get to the lowest temperature that your family or group wants. Like I was talking about, if you have somebody who likes it, you know, medium rare, then you're going to want that to be, 5 degrees below your medium rare temperature. Then you take it out of the oven and transfer it to a cutting board so it can rest, and it stops cooking right away because you've got rid of the thing that had the heat, the skillet, right? So transfer it to a cutting board, one with those little rimmed edges to catch any juices that leak out, and then let it rest for a good 10 minutes. And then you are slicing it thinly against the grain. And I'm just going to tell you, the grain in tri-tip is pretty weird. And I have done a video that is on TikTok and Instagram showing this grain and how to cut it. You should definitely check that out. And I have a post coming out on Cook the Story called How to Cut Tri-tip that also has that video in it. I do talk about it in the recipe that I'm linking to as well. So there's plenty of information, diagrams, everything. But what's interesting to note is because this steak has a triangular shape and therefore 3 sides, of course the grain is not uniform and it kind of turns in the steak. So the best thing to do is have a look at it before you even cook it. Get a sense of where that grain is. And then once it's cooked and it's time to slice it, you already know what you need to do. I find it easiest to cut it in 2 pieces, right where the grain sort of changes the most dramatically. And then I work with 1 piece, slicing it against its grain and then the other piece. That's pretty much it. I cannot wait for you to try this cut of meat. It is so delicious. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there, or find it in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. And hey, just a quick note. I'm on a recording hiatus right now, so for the next little while, I'm replaying episodes from the archives, including this one. If you heard me mention a holiday, a season, or something going on in my life that seemed a bit off, that's why. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying these older episodes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.